Yes, we're live. Hi, LinkedIn.
Yay!
Cow on the Ice episode, I can't remember, maybe 4. And you are on sportlov.
Yes, I am. That's very, very nice. I'm going to tell you more about that pretty soon, but I think we need to get in the right mood to start with. So, Andreas, can you give us a cow? Thank you. Hi, and welcome to Cow on the Ice.
Yes, it's episode 4 and our first episode in English. I had a personal bet with myself that this was going to happen before Easter. I never thought mid-February. I'm very pleased with you, Judith.
And for you non-Swedes who follow us, what is Cow on the Ice? It could be a bit strange. We understand that. So please, Aurora, could you tell everyone what is this? And you might need a good luck with it.
Cow on the ice is a Swedish expression, ingen ko på isen, which means no cow on the ice, which is an old traditional way of saying, don't worry, there's no cow on the ice, there's no need to worry or stress out about it. Chillax, there's no cow on the ice.
Oh, that's very impressive. But we have identified a lot of cows, and we're going to talk about them. One of them today, namely climate. But we're going to start with talking about AI in France, because a couple of days ago you went to France to the World Artificial Intelligence Festival. Tell us about it. What was it, and what was your main message?
Yes, it was interesting. I took my daughter and we went to the Cannes Film Festival. That's where they had this festival. So I think the festival is the play on that. And it was this huge gathering of global AI speakers, different breakout sessions for investors, and then for different sectors like industry, for climate, for consumers. And the Minister of Finance was one of the speakers. And in a very French way, I should be diplomatic. In a very French way, they were very bombastic about AI and France and Europe. And I think sometimes that's needed because we've just implemented the AI Act. And that's why I was there, to talk about the European competitiveness as we've signed the AI Act. And there is, again, trying to be a bit diplomatic, there's room to criticize Europe because we're going maybe regulation first. And the mean one-liner is that we're more focused on the regulation than the actual AI, than the actual innovation. And what does this mean? Does this mean that we've tied ourselves to position 3 in a global competition? Or, which was the minister's main point, and actually my main point as well, is that by creating a framework allowing European companies to understand this is the values that we want to build within, creating a level playing field, it actually has the opportunity to strengthen the European competitiveness. And I took the analogy that we speak a lot about, Judith, that in the same way as climate needs to be regulated, companies need to understand where we're heading, creating an understanding for a timeline, and therefore allowing them to invest in decreasing risk. But because I had my 6-year-old with me and her iPad in front of the stage, she completely stole my thunder. But I did the best I could to talk about these things.
You're such a pro. I just have to address also that the internet here is not as
perfect.
Disappearing, you know why, and I'm sorry for that. I've been all over this hotel to trying to find the best spot, but I haven't really solved that.
But tell us where you are.
Yeah, I am in Paris. And since I live in London, it's very easy to take the train to Paris. It takes just a few hours to get here. And my daughter has sportlov, or mid-term break, as they say. So we are here. Just a beautiful city, but it's also some kind of hub, at least for European AI startups. So we have Paris, and we also have London, where Google DeepMind is based. And one of the biggest, or one of the startups that is talked about most, I would say, is, I don't know how to pronounce it in French, Mistral. I need your help, Roar, because you do speak French. How do you say it?
I think you did very well, Judith. Mistral is there's an important to find there.
Okay, right. So Mistral is one of companies here, and they are described as a rival to OpenAI. But this startup is open source, so it's a bit different. It has got a lot of investment recently, co-founded by people from Meta and from Google DeepMind. So it's a big shot company, and what they do is very interesting. And here in Paris as well, they have a lot of talent when it comes to math, computer science, engineering, and stuff needed to be to really kick off AI companies.
And would
But
you
as
say,
you say,
sorry, one of the things that when one company creates that amount of buzz, does that hog all the attention for the rest of the ecosystem? Or would you predict, based on your conversations, that it actually has a halo effect, so all of the ecosystem benefits from this one big?
yeah, I would say a mix of it. Everyone is talking about Mistral, but I also get a sense that there's a lot of other companies that is interesting. In my research, I found Poolside, Dust, Gladia, Scenario, and lots of other French companies. So a lot of interesting things is happening here. But just to make clear, Europe is lagging behind the Americans, as you say, Aurore, by quite a lot. So we are not at all in the forefront, but things are starting to happen, which is exciting.
And then it doesn't, I have this conversation with my 6-year-old a lot. Everything doesn't have to be a competition. You don't have to win the whole. You can still create a very interesting company. But we love to do this whole competition. Europe is behind the China, Europe. And maybe that isn't a useful lens for everything.
True,
or maybe it is. Maybe I'm indoctrinated by my own crap that I give my daughter to open her views. You don't have to win always.
But it's not a good thing to be too far behind either. So
no, that's
true.
True.
I don't know.
But there's something to be said. Sorry, there's something to be said about the utilizing artificial intelligence for what you're good at, like creating it within the industries that you have. And I think the French have a point there, and the Swedes as well.
Yeah, true. But let's change topic and start talking about climate. And for you to introduce our great guest that we have today.
Yes. But should we start, Andreas, with a bit of a vignette, which I don't know the English word for? Yes, and so let the show begin. We have our guest who has flown in. I shouldn't even say that. Why did I start with that? Your means of transportation.
I live on an island.
Bela.
We would have got to it.
Bela, welcome to Stockholm.
Thank you so much.
Bela is a partner together with Ross, who's outside here, but there are not enough seats and microphones. So you had to pick one of the partners, and it was Bela, to talk about Keeling Capital, which is the fund of funds that you're building. And you're investing purely in carbon and decarbonization. And the Keeling curve, I've learned from you, correct me if I'm wrong here, Bela, is the actual curve that measures the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And your mission statement is therefore to bend the curve. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct.
Yay. I read the brochure correctly. We're so excited to have you here because we want to talk about climate, investing into climate, the technologies that underpin hitting our net zero targets. And you have a very interesting umbrella overview of where the global funds right now are investing. And that's what we're going to get into to hopefully see where there's optimism, where there's opportunity, and where there's maybe room for improvement.
Exciting.
Welcome.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Judith, will you kick us off?
I can do that. So our podcast is Cow on the Ice, and you heard Aurore describe what that is. And the livestock production, mainly cows, account for 14% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So my first question, therefore, is what does the future of food look like, according to you? Because we cannot keep on producing meat and dairy the way we do today. So it may be a bit odd first question, but you understand why I put it first.
Yeah, let's dive into it because it's an area that is one of the most, I say, contentious. It's pretty emotive, and people have strong feelings on it, regardless of how well informed they are, including a pretty ideological thing. You know, I belong to a tribe, I'm a vegan, or I'm this or that, and you're either in or out. So yeah, let's start with food. So food, agriculture, and land use represents about 20%, let's say, of the greenhouse gas emissions. And meat production and cow production, beef and dairy in particular, is the worst culprit and the biggest cause of deforestation globally. Frankly, it's not a massive focus for us at Keeling Capital because we just don't really see the venture opportunity within food and ag to be as robust as across the energy complex. So production and transmission and use of energy. I will say there is a big room to transition our diet that would have a big effect. Frankly, there's a lot of social change that needs to go into it. It's a little bit less tractable in terms of technology solutions, although there are feed additives. The other thing to say, and again, it makes it a very thorny topic, but oftentimes there's actually a trade-off between animal welfare and environmental sustainability in terms of how we raise our protein. So I might leave that one a little bit short because lest we get into too contentious an area. But yeah, it's a big thing. There's people working on it.
Interesting, Bale. I've known you for 6 months. This is the first time I see you're like diplomatic and weighing your words a little.
So tell me about your company then. What you're doing. Pitch us.
So as Aurora said, we're building climate tech fund of funds. So what that means is we are raising a pool of capital. We're going to invest in 15 of the top VC managers globally that are investing in decarbonization.
Okay,
solutions.
no abbreviations. VC means?
Venture capital.
Thank you.
So each of these funds are going to invest in anywhere from 15 to 30 early stage companies. So that could be as early as pre-seed all the way up in sort of early growth, sort of Series B, Series C, where companies have real commercial traction and need additional capital to grow faster.
And for those who are not into the venture space or understanding early stage technology, are there tens, 50, 100, 1,000, tens of thousands of funds that are investing in climate right now?
So we define our universe as all venture, all climate. So we don't invest in funds that are generalist impact funds that will do things like education or healthcare. And we don't invest in generalist deep tech funds that will do things across climate and energy and also AI and biotech. So our universe is something like 300 funds globally.
300 funds. Sorry.
A surprising number.
A surprising number. A surprisingly surprising number. And out of those 300 funds, what are the underlying, how many dedicated, brave heroes and entrepreneurs are building technology for us as a globe to hit our net zero targets?
So it's probably pretty tricky to put a number on, but in and around 2,000 to 3,000. If you sort of look at the number of deals done this year, last year, and the cadence at which companies raise new rounds, it'll be something between 2,000 and 3,000. And
educate us. So agriculture is one piece. What are the different strands to understand how to use technology to mitigate? So our starting point is the emissions pie. So where do all the greenhouse gas emissions come from? As I mentioned at the top, in relation to food, ag, and land use is about 20% of that. Ag is short for agriculture. Thank you. Yes. I feel like a teacher. I appreciate it. And the rest is basically energy. So this is production of electricity and heat, plus its end uses. So mobility, transport, cars, planes, trains, industry. There it is. There it is. So yeah, you can see the 3/4 is basically energy, and you can break that down into built environments. So heating and cooling, chemicals, steel, cement, and all the things we need for. Is it possible to show the diagram that I sent to you? We just saw it. Oh, you just saw it. Perfect. Yeah. Sorry.
Great.
Don't worry. No, and I have a question on the diagram that we just saw. Is it a 1-to-1 relationship? So if 3/4 are energy, would 3/4 of your investments be in energy? Would you follow this map in terms?
No, it'll be more than 3/4 into the energy complex, because as you can see there in agriculture, forestry, and land use, you have soils, rice cultivation, crop burning. These aren't things that are necessarily super tractable with technology solutions. Whereas everything more or less in the energy bucket really has to do with physical infrastructure that we build, and is sort of inherently technology based. The one thing that's not on this, on that pie that we will also invest in is around carbon management. So that's either point source capture, where you capture CO2 from concentrated streams like ethanol plants or cement, or carbon dioxide removal, which is really around taking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere that are already there.
Great. And you invest in early stages, but also growth stages of early stage innovations that makes you really excited. So it becomes a bit more tangible.
We now have to guess a little what Judith wanted. Again, Judith?
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, no. Do you hear me now? I'm so
Yes.
sorry.
We lost you at tangible.
Oh, okay. So you invest in early stages. Could you give us some example of early stage innovations that you find extra exciting and that you really want to invest in, dig down deep into?
Yeah, so I think we sort of break the technology into two broad groups. That is the enabling technologies, which are really required to scale really mature platform technologies to the point where they become climate relevant. So that's solar PV, wind, EVs, batteries, heat pumps. But the stuff I find a bit more exciting, frankly, even though it might be further out, is where we uncover things that we just come totally out of left field, but could be transformative. So one of our underlying portfolio companies, for example, that just announced a 245 million Series B, is in the geological hydrogen space.
What's that?
Yeah, good question. This is something that I pay pretty close attention to this space. I didn't hear about it until about 18 months ago, where the manager who invested in this company originally told me about it. There's been a reasonable amount of stuff in the press since, so maybe we can share some of that. Geological hydrogen is deposits of hydrogen that are stored in reservoirs underground, the same way you'd have natural gas or oil, that can effectively be developed in the same way. You drill down and then you bring them up. So you're sort of utilizing an existing natural resource rather than using renewable electricity, which is already in pretty high demand, to run through an electrolyzer to split water into hydrogen. So that's something which is an actual scaled, abundant source of hydrogen, which, for your information and for your listeners, is mostly used for chemicals at the moment, fertilizer primarily and refining. And this opens up to using it in steel production or possibly even energy, which is, really the next stage once you have sufficient abundance, which is, as I said, we're not going to get through using renewable electricity.
And I think we could spend hours looking at examples after examples of this. And if we take an aggregated view, are you genuinely optimistic? Is there enough technologies, enough smart capital? Is there enough access to it, infrastructure, political understanding? Are we moving in the right direction?
I'd say we're definitely moving in the right direction. You can be more or less optimistic depending on what metric you look at. Obviously, the big bit really is, how do we supply enough energy for both existing requirements and also for billions of people that need to move from kind of poverty into the middle class. So the good news is we're on an exponential trend with wind and solar in particular. So this is pretty much accounting for the vast majority of electricity demand growth year over year. So as demand goes up, the vast majority of that's being filled with low carbon electricity, but not all of it. So in the two biggest markets, China and India, in India, demand growth is still outpacing renewables. So they're still building more coal plants to supply more electricity. in China, and I think this is maybe one of the biggest stories at the moment, their coal use in the power sector might actually peak this year, as they start to use their coal plants less more for to fill in the variable renewables. So that's a massive positive. But to decarbonize, and I think this is something that gets lost a lot of the time in maybe like blind optimism or boosterism, or some people that are really sort of, I'd say, like wind and solar ideologues, is that to decarbonize, to bend the curve, we need to not only cover all of demand growth with low carbon sources, we need to take very meaningful chunks out of existing generation, and not only electricity generation, obviously, which is only one part of it, but also a lot of industrial things, cement, steel, chemicals, and that's going to take a very long time.
And one thing is that it takes a very long time. And the other thing is that the landscape is complex. And wherever you go, there is a but or if or think about that.
There's no free lunch.
There is no free lunch. And it's very easy. And Judith and I joke about it a lot. It's the easiest way to seem smart is to criticize, which means that everywhere you go here, it's very easy to go, but did you think of that? Or but here, or but that.
What we call the nirvana fallacy.
Exactly. So, and one thing that we wanted to ask you is this: the tech optimism that exists in the venture capital space and in the tech ecosystem, where there's some sort of AI is here to save the day. It's a silver bullet, and everyone that's running a company says, if we only do this, it will cover 110% of our usage of blah blah blah. Like, how do you address that?
I don't think that's a very grown-up or nuanced approach.
It's still prevalent.
I'll tell you what gives us real optimism is we're capable of amazing things as a species when we apply ourselves to specific challenges. And in climate, we've only just started to apply ourselves. So people say, we haven't really made that much progress, which, by the way, is not true. And I'll maybe unpack that again in a second. But the other thing is we've only just started trying. So we have no idea what we're capable of. Time after time after time. I mean, this is like the Malthusian thing, right? The population bomb, Paul Ehrlich in the 60s. We need to have these horrific sort of population control mechanisms because we're going to use up all the land, et cetera, et cetera. So we use less land now for food than we did previously. There's never been a resource shortage that we haven't managed to work our way around. Some of the smartest people on the planet are now making it their life's work to create really
So that is your impression after mapping the market. Some of the smartest people on the planet is on this.
100%. So if you think about John Doerr just gave Stanford $1 billion.
Who's John Doerr?
He is one of the founders of Kleiner Perkins, one of the most prominent Silicon Valley. You
can't just name drop people here. This is
sorry. Thank you. You have the name drop with the technical klaxon, borrowed off Michael Liebreich. So John Doerr, very, very successful investor. He gave $1 billion to Stanford to create a school of sustainability. If you ask my opinion, not the best use of $1 billion since Stanford has 50 already of their own. But in any case, he would say that 10 years ago, everyone coming out of Stanford wanted to create an app. Now everyone wants to create a climate company. The CTO or former CTO of Meta has left to fully dedicate himself to climate. This is what I want to bring more engineering talent, more technical talent into this space. We see this all the time. We always have people reach out to us saying, I want to pivot my career into this. So it's happening on a very meaningful scale.
So this guy is author. Say it again.
Do you feel comforted? Is there?
I don't know. I think it's a tricky question, and I'm glad that you didn't give that question to me. But I just want to add as well, isn't John the author of Speed and Scale, this book that
Correct.
is
Yeah.
A big one that a lot of people have read, and if you haven't read it, it's a very good book. It's more an optimism angle of the transition, so I think we need the both sides, but it's worth reading, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is you have to be optimistic, and sometimes more than sometimes, regularly, we talk to people who have like very deep anxiety around the direction a lot of this is going. And
Judith and I belong to that group sometimes. We try to pick each other up. And one of the reasons we have this pod is just to create an outlet for a bit of anxiety, but also creativity and try to be optimistic.
Yeah, and I mean, for sure, we need to feel the urgency. This is clearly, environmental sustainability writ large is super important. And there's a lot of things which are going in the wrong direction. But the picture is not entirely bleak. There's a lot of things that are going in the right direction. And it's not helpful to anyone to feel anxious. Like the best cure for anxiety is action as well. So, and for people who, want to have their career in something else, or it just doesn't suit them, or they don't want to pivot into actually working this full time, rather than flogging yourself over, did I use too many disposable coffee cups or whatever else, create a monthly direct debit to Clean Air Task Force or some other advocacy group that's advocating for climate policies across the world, and you will have multiple leverage versus whatever you can do in your own life with your own habits. And just get on with living your life, because you only get one, so you might as well enjoy it.
And looking at all this, and from that point of view of like, how do we spend our time, assuming, which I think I correctly assume, that our listeners are some of the best and the brightest, how would you recommend them spending their time? Obviously, skill set and blah, 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 but like building companies or building funds to allocate capital towards companies?
Yeah, I would not advise people to build funds.
No, interesting.
Unless they have, seriously, unless you have something very specific. That say, okay, there is a white space here.
Don't compete with us. Is that what you're saying?
No. We invest in funds. We speak to everyone who has a fund, everyone who wants to have a fund. And frankly, the extent of the pitch we get sometimes is, climate's a big challenge, it's a big opportunity, and I want to be a VC. And frankly, you could probably do something better with your time. We were, of course, in a venture capital and private market bubble in 2021. Some people probably did manage to raise funds based on that thesis, or based on the fact that the investors they were talking to were insufficiently sophisticated to find them out. But frankly, from our perspective, or for any sophisticated LP, you should have a real drive why you're doing a particular thing. And
so
why
let's
you're
pretend
yourself.
no one's listening, Bela. How do you uncover the BS? So if someone says, yes, climate is a huge opportunity, the energy transition, then do some arrows up, and this is where we're going to invest.
Yeah, we got a lot of that.
What are the key questions that you did I need to know to understand what's BS and what's real?
Well, to a degree, you can look at their track record. So, I mean, climate is a molecules game. It has to do with our physical infrastructure. So a lot of time we see people who were successful software entrepreneurs or investors, even maybe B2B SaaS, consumer internet, whatever else. And they're like, okay, well, now we're going into climate and we're doing low carbon hydrogen or decarbonized steel or whatever else it is. So there's just a sanity check. What does someone's background really, does that match with the investment thesis? And by the way, we are more hardware focused because that's where the real solutions are, by and large.
Can we quote you on that? I think that's a lovely tweet in itself. Hardware, that's where the solutions are at.
100%. And the other thing is that, frankly, there's more investors out there who can pattern recognize with software. So those tend to be a bit more competitive. And both from an investment perspective and from a commercial competitive perspective. But the other thing is then, you actually look at people's underwriting. Okay, how did you get comfortable with this? How did you get comfortable with that? Let's see your investment memos. And
okay,
yeah.
I asked a question. We got too technical in a fund structure. I'm
too
sorry.
Too deep, too fast.
I apologize to everyone. Judith, I have one last question, but before, I'm sure you have one as well.
Yeah. I want to ask about the time horizon, because you invest on a 10 years time horizon, right? Why is that reasonable to think 10 years ahead?
Because things take time to build, inevitably. So we're investing in the early stages by and large. So generally speaking, the science is being de-risked. There's stuff to work out on the engineering side. And then mostly, especially because we're dealing with hardware, it takes time to move up through to industrial scale. So the second part of my, had Aurora not cut me off on the last question around discovering people's BS, is actually digging in with managers. Do they understand what that industrialization process is? And it's iterative and it takes time to build. And also, frankly, from a returns perspective, and this doesn't matter whether you're doing generous venture capital or climate tech, really what you want is big outcomes. And from that perspective, you need to allow that growth to compound over a long time, because all the real returns are the back end of compounding.
What does that mean?
So if something's growing at 20% a year for 5 years, you get to a certain level. I'm not going to try and do that in my head, but it's going to be, I don't know.
Big.
Well, it's going to be, let's say 3x maybe. If you let it run for another 5 years at 20% a year, then that's growing on a bigger number. So,
but let me translate that to someone that's not investing. That also means that the technologies that are going to make play a societal difference are rethinking industries and rethinking products and rethinking things, as opposed to making small changes to what already exists.
It's a bit of both. So what already exists now that's passing the threshold where it actually has climate relevance, wind, solar, etc. I mean, these have been around for decades. EVs, maybe you could argue when it really got going, but it takes time for that to grow to cross 5% market share, to cross ultimately sort of 15% market share, where it's starting to displace some of the legacy heavy emitting stuff. So there is a ton of that. And then, as I said earlier on, there's also a lot of technologies which are more enabling. So what are the things that allowed us to have higher percentages of variable renewables in the grid, manage more EV charging, help to integrate these things? Those tend to be less transformative or disruptive, but still they take time to compound year after year, where you actually have really meaningful investment outcomes.
And it just proves, Judith, in my constant point, there are no silver bullets. You need to do multiple things in parallel. You need to have multiple timelines in parallel. And for me, it's been very useful, or also get rid of some of the anxiety, to see that there are funds that are doing this in a good way. You have a BS alarm bell, so you can identify who's doing it just to ride the wave and look good within this space. And also an indication that some of the best and the brightest are now building companies in this space.
We're going to see amazing things happen in the next 10 years.
Yeah, hopefully.
But in two strands. Sorry.
No, I thank you for a very wise discussion. I'm so happy to listen to you, and thank you for taking your time, even though I'm a bit, is so-and-so. But thank you so much. I think it was a positive and optimistic talk. And even though it's hard and that I'm anxious a lot of the time, I agree with you that action is the way forward to feel better as an individual as well.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me. And the first English Cow in the Ice podcast is pretty exciting.
Thank you. Bye.
Move.